Ready to go? Okay, well, thank you for coming this morning. I hope everybody had a good time at the show yesterday and had some fun in the city last night. This session is best practices for building an enterprise content delivery network. And basically, the agenda is going to be, we're going to do some brief introductions of the panelists here. Then we're going to talk about, what is an enterprise CDN? Why do you need it? Could I just use the cloud? Why can't I use the cloud? And some deployment approaches, and then some deployment considerations. Then we'll have questions and answers. Now, the other enterprise sessions that I've gone to, and I had another session on the cloud yesterday, there was a lot of Q&A, so I'd like to, open it up. I don't want to hold questions to the end. If you have a question or a comment, please feel free to raise your hand, and then we'll try to address it. So we want this to be very conversational. Quickly, introduction on myself. My name's Andy Howard. I'm the founder and managing director of Howard & Associates, which is a consulting firm that helps organizations deploy video streaming, video conferencing, and often now the integration of those two into unified communication solutions. So I've worked with some large organizations such as Deloitte Consulting and WellPoint, as well as some colleges and universities to help them deploy video on their networks. Prior to that, I was with VBrick Systems, which is an exhibitor here at the show, for a number of years, and going way back, worked for Cashflow, for Blue Code Systems, which at the time was Cashflow, and I helped deploy the first streaming media caching appliance back in 1999, so I've been in the space for a while. So on the panel here we have Alan Tardif, who's with Prudential, Jeff Hanley, who's with KLA-Tencor, and Chuck Sullivan with Cisco. So Alan, why don't you just give a little background on yourself, as well as what you've done in terms of deploying content delivery networks at Prudential.
All right, I've been working with streaming video for about 10 years at Prudential. We started with a token ring network, which if you know anything about networks, you can't stream video in a token ring network. So we went up to a switched network that was Ethernet. I worked with network engineering to deploy streaming video over that. We've looked at several vendors. We landed on one. We actually use a mix of different vendors to deploy our content. Prudential is a public company, so we're regulated, and when you start looking at the cloud and you start looking at any security breaches in information, that's pretty tough for a business like Prudential. So our firewall's pretty dense, I would say. It's hard to get in and get out with streaming. We do allow streaming to come in. We don't necessarily let streaming go out. We don't open the port 80 or whatever to go back and forth. I guess that's about it. I'll save the rest for later. Jeff?
I'm Jeff Hanley. I'm the senior manager of digital media for KLA-Tencor in Silicon Valley. I've been streaming in the Valley for 13 years now for pretty major technology companies. Where I engage this topic is on the content side. I've been leading creative teams at Oracle and at Cisco and at KLA-Tencor now for 7 years, and most recently engaged with my partners in IT to deploy an enterprise video platform that brings 10 to 12 years of video and other content together into one cohesive platform for the first time in a long history of producing content for the company. So some of that installation and deployment is going on back home right now while I'm here with you guys today. And so it's all very fresh in my mind. And one thing I came prepared to talk about is some of the best practices that we deployed or employed to bring the platform in and get it established. And I hope if you have some questions about that I can help you out with that.
Chuck?
Good morning. Thank you for attending this session. My name is Chuck Sullivan. I'm the senior product manager for Cisco's Enterprise Content Delivery System, also known as the ECDS. Although I'm relatively new to Cisco, I've been also a number of high technology companies selling hardware and software-based solutions across video security, data networking, and a variety of other technology spaces. Cisco's been quietly selling and deploying CDNs to enterprises over the last 10 years, and with tens of thousands of units deployed across all different types of scale and verticals in enterprise, from manufacturing to pharma, retail, finance, education, government, across the board, all again from small to medium-sized enterprises. The ECDS product, I'll try not to get too centric on the product today, is really a third or fourth generation technology within Cisco. It is actually exists in the business unit and shares code with the same service provider video distribution suite products that we sell into the service providers for them to create their own content distribution network. So it's a highly scalable, flexible, and cost-effective solution. Great.
All right, well, let's jump right into the session here. And the first thing I think that we need to ask is, I ran a panel yesterday about cloud services, and a lot of the discussion was, well, why you don't need to deploy stuff on your internal network because you can leverage the cloud for distribution. That works very well if you're going out to the internet and you can leverage an internet content delivery network. But in the enterprise, a lot of the content needs to stay internal. So that's really why the enterprises need to build content delivery networks internal so that that content can stay local. So, Alan, what kind of prompted Prudential to have to deploy these technologies, and what were sort of some of the first steps that you needed to go through?
We started with a satellite network, so we were broadcasting the CEOs. I work in the corporate office, the corporate headquarters. We manage the message from the top all the way down, deploy it to the edge, to the most narrow part of the network on a domestic footprint of Prudential. So we started with a satellite network, and then streaming, came into its own, and we started with streaming, and because mainly cost factors, having a satellite truck and doing all the things with satellite, and also with time shifting, people not being able to watch things when they're live, so that added to our need for a streaming network. And a CDN, we built our own CDN. It's sort of homegrown. We've used several different companies. But we also have a multicast-enabled network, which enables us to use a multicast for live streaming, and in addition to replay. But as I said before, we're a publicly traded company. Securities on our information is very high, so we have to keep track of all our content, and that's why we're using it.
Okay. Jeff?
Well, like a lot of companies, we didn't just wake up one morning and decide we were going to build a streaming infrastructure and throw a bunch of resources into it. We sort of, I won't say stumbled, that's the wrong word, but we sort of worked our way into it over the years, starting with a network that was probably designed for email. And somewhere my predecessors got the idea that they wanted to do some streaming, so they invested in some tools. Some of the people came from a broadcast background, so they approached it that way. And if you've worked in this space for a long time, you know that the technology decisions that you make one day could very well be obsolete fairly quickly. And staying nimble, staying open to new technology and new ideas has been very, very important for us. And we've had to work very closely with the other stakeholders in the company to balance the impact on the network, to balance the communications objectives of the various groups in the company. We're a very communication and knowledge-rich culture, and a huge percentage of the company's value is IP. And so protecting that IP, getting it to the people who should have it and keeping it away from the people who shouldn't have it has always been a big factor in how the decisions that we make about how we get the video or the other content out there. We're a very heavy training company. Our company invests a lot of resources in training employees. And as the company's grown out around the world, we're dealing with many, many cultures. So the task of getting the content to people, tracking it, protecting it, improving the user experience has been an ongoing process and continues to this day. I don't think we've ever found the one answer. And actually the answer for us has been to cobble together all our incremental answers into a cohesive, unified whole that works for people in 2013. And I've been doing this long enough to know that things might be different next year. There might be some new technologies and some new opportunities next year that will cause us to jog left or right to address those needs.
So Chuck, we talked a little bit yesterday about how enterprise networks are built and how a lot of people just think that every office is going to have direct connectivity to the internet, but in many cases that's not the case. So can you go into that a little bit on explaining why that really impacts where you place the equipment and why you need to build the CDN?
Sure, Andy. I think maybe we start with answering what is a CDN.
Right.
CDN is inherently a caching network, right? You've seen the likes of Akamai and Cisco, the products I mentioned previously in the service provider space. Building out an infrastructure which allows you to cache content, typically HTTP-driven content, as close and as local as possible to the clients and the users. Every time we're surfing the internet, you see the CDN down there on the left side of your browser potentially that is talking about. I think probably not telling anything that you all don't already know, but it's a very, very powerful and capable thing to do within your enterprise, particularly when you have large size content that you don't want to overwhelm your enterprise WAN infrastructure. So in the context of what we're talking about here, video is obviously a large file size, which drives a lot of bandwidth usage, or could, if you're talking about multiple users streaming simultaneously across your WAN from a single location, or even if you had a distributed internet connectivity where you're pulling things off the internet, there is the case for bottlenecks. The CDN's goal is to stop those bottlenecks and to really drive the best quality of experience for the end users to deliver, particularly video, with a high level of predictability. And also when you have the concept of managed content, it's important to be able to manage that within your own infrastructure and your own network. I agree wholeheartedly. I would like to probably get into the use case. I think there's a lot of use cases. Why a CDN? So maybe that's your next question. I wholeheartedly agree with Jeff here. Our customers' training is one of the key use cases. There's other. Live is really probably equally important. Live broadcasts, we call CEO town hall meetings, that type of thing. And when you're talking about a large global company which has a number of different cultures, training becomes very important. And being able to distribute geographically specific content within your infrastructure is important. So all these are drivers for why do you need a CDN.
Sure. So let's talk about the live streaming, like the CEO broadcast thing, because that's one of, well, first of all, it's the most high-profile event you can have, because if the CEO's up there talking, you don't want something to go wrong. And also, it's typically when you have the most users accessing video content all at one time. So there's really two ways you can help facilitate that environment. One is multicasting. So what multicasting on an enterprise network basically means, you send out one stream and the network kind of replicates that stream. So you really just have one stream going on your backbone rather than each person grabbing an individual stream from a server. And then there's another method of doing the same type of thing, is to do what's called live stream splitting, where you pull one stream down to a caching appliance, and then that appliance can then distribute it to multiple users. So are you using both of those techniques in your environment? I mean, it kind of depends on how the network's set up, whether multicast is even available, whether you're using a satellite network, things like that. Can we talk about some of the considerations there?
Yeah, we actually, the way we multicast across our network is with intelligent switches. The switches actually multicast. We send one stream down off the backbone to a floor on any given building. That switch is multicast enabled. It distributes on that floor. So it is a combination.
Now, are all of your locations multicast enabled, like the whole network, or?
No, the whole network
Okay.
is not multicast enabled. You start getting into a VDN type of external. That's people who are away from the home office. That's how we securely connect them back to the network,
Okay.
and are able to monitor that traffic. To my knowledge, you can't multicast across a VDI, not VDI, VPN, virtual private network.
Right.
So that's not an option. That's a unicast. So the network engineers are very sensitive to that. So while we don't have that many people on the VPN, unless there's something like Sandy, our company's based in New Jersey. Sandy hit, and a lot of people were forced to work at home. Granted, some people didn't have electricity, so they weren't able to work at all. But the people who did have electricity were able to get on the network. We're a financial services company. We have to have business continuation plans. So we have to keep all of our business moving, and communication is a big part of that equation.
How do you guys do it, Jeff?
Well, when corporate communications came to me about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, and said they wanted to go live with the quarterly all hands meeting, I was pretty excited. And then I went to a couple of very agitated meetings with IT and got a little less excited when I started to hear from them what the ramifications were of trying to serve a global community with a reasonable quality webcast. So we first went to a vendor. We first enlisted a vendor who had been doing our analyst calls because corporate communications was comfortable with them. And we worked with them for quite some time. And my team worked on the front end and produced the event, shot the video and all that, and then we pretty much handed it over to the vendor who was sitting right next to us at a table just like this, who then used their connections with Akamai to stream it around the world, and to people who were not only working in offices in other regions, but also to people who were watching from home and connected to the VPN. So after a while, just doing that began to be as much of a production overhead as everything else that was going into it, just getting this vendor in and making that all work. So we slowly peeled them off and slowly pared down what we were doing to the fundamentals. And one of the things that started off at the very beginning, they were very afraid of people watching at their desktops. And they just thought that would just bring the network to its knees. Mm-hmm. So they did this thing where they brought people into large size meeting rooms and conference rooms and the large dining room at our company at HQ. And at first we were compensating for the network shortcomings. And then after a while we discovered there was a big value in that. There was like a communal viewing aspect to it that I don't think anyone saw coming.
Right.
So, and I think that's now become part of the culture, is people get together and they watch the event together in a room with anywhere from 20 or 30 to 200 to 300 of their colleagues, and there's a real kind of excitement about that. It's easier to manage Q&A. It's easier to manage access in that kind of situation. The IP protection is not quite as big a problem, and what was kind of a compensation decision ended up becoming a key part of the culture. So right now we're streaming over our network to these 16 or 18 large viewing rooms. And then because most of and a few other locations live in the Western United States, but then we assume that people aren't going to be up after hours in Singapore or in India or in Germany to watch this event. So we turn around the on-demand in about an hour. So it's ready we do them on Thursday afternoons. It's ready and to go by late Thursday evening and definitely by Friday morning. So these other regions that come into the office are able to watch the on-demand. And you know, it's been a way for us to work with the current network infrastructure that we have and still get the content out there as quickly as possible to the people who want to see it.
And do you proactively push the files out to like a remote caching appliance, or
For some of the regions,
do
yes.
on pull?
Yeah, for some of the regions, yes, because this group viewing phenomenon has kind of taken over, and now that's the way they like to do it.
Yeah.
You know, the local managers or directors like to be in the room to, you know, if there's important policy changes or financial data that needs explaining that people have questions about, the leaders of the company are in the room with the people, and they sort of curate the meeting.
Yeah.
And that's been very successful for us.
So it's more of a cultural thing. It's really truly like a town hall.
It is,
Because
very
you got
much so.
everybody sort of coming together.
Yeah, because otherwise you have a bunch of isolated people sitting at their desktops and the phone's ringing and they're turning down the audio and they're not really listening to what's going on. And in this way, at least a little more communal participation is encouraged.
Right. So what about Cisco's customers? They typically do multicast or stream splitting or some combination of the two?
It's really both.
Yeah.
You know, our technology will support both. I mean, we really recognize that, you know, there's no single there's no identical IT infrastructure from a network perspective, or even how IT departments make their decisions, right? Some we want to run multicast in our WAN infrastructure, and that's how we're going to do live events. Some want to do the stream splitting, as you mentioned. We support both capabilities. Generally, the model here, you know, again, going back to the generic concept of a CDN, is let's make sure the content flows over that WAN once, right? That's the most efficient way of doing it. And then you're really in a situation where you're dynamically caching, or as you mentioned it, you know, pre-positioning. You know, the technologies are out there which allow you to pre-position content so that when that out of time zone, you know, area wants to view that that VOD file, you know, you still don't have that issue of, you know, they get there 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, they're all trying to pull it off the network simultaneously. So there's the technologies to very actively push it out, schedule at specific times, make use of when, you know, bandwidth is cheapest, when it, you know, overnight, those type of things. You know, the one thing about multicast, you know, there are people who attempt to do that without any sort of CDNs, and you know, it works to to some extent, but multicast is not going to help you with the VOD. You know, that's purely going to be for live.
Right. Yeah, I think that, you know, that's a very key point, is that the, you know, bandwidth on the local area networks is plentiful. That's not really the issue, but it's going from office to office where you've got a WAN link, which is typically the lowest bandwidth segment of the network. That's where you really want to limit the amount of redundant traffic that's going over that. So you want to be able to pull a live stream once and then distribute it out at the far end. Same with a VOD file. You can either have them pull it once or pre-position it out at the edge, and then people will be pulling it locally. So that's the most important thing from a bandwidth perspective. Question in the back?
Yes. You know, a lot of you guys talked about VPN as you have a number of people who are connecting via VPN. How do you handle the traffic over your VPN tunnels, either live or on demand?
All right, so how do we handle it? Well, network engineering watches those the traffic that's going across those VPN lines. We just opened VPN up for live. We didn't allow live broadcasting to those remote areas before, remote users. And those the remote users will, the number of remote users is pretty much known until there's a crisis. We do have a maximum, and we do try to test to that, but until something like Sandy happens, it's sort of a best guess. But we do have to cap the bit rate on our videos so that we're not running, you know, high def 2 meg video streams across the VPN. We're capped at about 300K. So people are doing work, and as much as we would like to think they're watching all of our videos, it isn't always the case. We do distribute, and a lot of it is very targeted to narrow audiences. So, so far it hasn't been a problem.
So what happens if you hit the max? Do you not accept the connection, or?
I'm not sure what happens. I know that if we go above 500, if I were to post a video that's above 500K, it just wouldn't accept it.
Okay.
It would not go across the VPN network. So they throttled that back to help them out. I kind of mediated, worked with those guys. So we try to keep our videos between 3 and 500K. But there is a way of them, putting controls on the individual video streams.
Right. Let me just make one more point about that. There's also another. So in that example, the user's coming in, accessing the content via the VPN, and you're actually streaming it to them over the VPN tunnel. There's another concept called split tunneling, where the user can come into the network over the VPN, but they actually get the video through a different path that's not on the VPN. So in which case it would be coming from like a public CDN. So that's a little bit less secure if you really want all that content to be encrypted over the VPN, but it also has some benefits in the fact that you can leverage a public CDN in order to do that.
Are any of you using QoS to address some of the problems of latency or bandwidth consumption?
Yeah, I'm pretty certain that our network team is monitoring that kind of traffic, and for one thing, there's a lot of traffic on our network that is not video. I mean, there's a lot of apps data being moved back and forth between the various divisions of the company and the offices. Just a lot of other data that isn't video content or media content. And so they have a priority system that they use that guarantees quality of service for certain things, and prioritizes lower down the list other things. I'll tell you what impacts our network in terms of media is not our internal content. It's people watching external content. It's like the inauguration pretty much stopped us in our tracks. And
How are you differentiating between, say, your quarterly town hall and people watching YouTube or the news?
yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what their technique is on that. I mean, obviously the traffic peaks within the first 72 hours after the all-hands meeting, and then it's not really so much a problem after that. And it depends on what the content is. When the CEO gave everyone in the company an iPad at the town hall meeting or the all-hands meeting, we had a pretty serious bump as people wanted to watch it. Just a regular old all-hands meeting that isn't quite as exciting as that has a little less impact.
Yeah, I would say, in terms of streaming video, QoS obviously is helpful if you can prioritize the video content. It's not as important as video conferencing, where you've got a two-way communication that's very sensitive to delay and jitter and packet loss. Because streaming, you tend to buffer some content on the client, so you can ride out those issues when you have some sort of network problem. Is there another question in the back?
Speaking of iPads, are you guys having to prepare for how new devices are affecting how your employees watch either training or these all-hands?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's one of the reasons we invested in the enterprise video platform that we did, because it has a very robust mobility component. So we have our media content is more than just flat video files. We have years and years of synchronized multimedia presentations that have been captures of classroom presentations, technical talks, 2-day-long seminars, things like that. Then we have a lot of essentially flash-based training content that we produce with Captivate or Adobe Presenter or one of those other tools. And so we looked for something, basically converting a flat video file to a mobile a mobile compatible codec or file is not a problem. It's the other stuff that is much more browser and player dependent. And so we looked for a solution that would allow us to pretty much put all our content in the platform and make it searchable and trackable, which we've never had the capability of doing up to this point. We had some tracking, but almost no searching. Search at our company was, you know, a phone call. Hey, Jeff, I remember this guy who did this video 8 years ago about lasers. I think his name was Bob, or maybe it was Pierre. Can you find me that video? You know, so I'm pretty excited that I hope those phone calls are going to stop, and we'll have some searchability. But the mobile thing, I mean, our audience, our internal employee audience is increasingly younger, and increasingly more comfortable with their mobile devices. So I'm pushing to make our content available to them, and we had to make a choice. We had to say, okay, we're going to support this iOS flavor, and we're going to support these Android flavors, and that's where we're going to draw the line. And we try to be fairly forward-looking in that, but we can't really support every single thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because people want to consume video on their iPads in particular. I mean, the smartphone, you could argue that that's not a great experience. I don't really like watching it on my smartphone, but an iPad's great. But it really does, it's one of the key drivers, I think, of enterprise content delivery networks today, because if you think about it in the past, if I was just accessing it from the content from PCs or Macs, I would do, let's say I wanted to do a live stream, I'd do it in Windows Media or Flash. I could multicast it, reach most of the users, and I can have a good experience. But then if you add an iPad into the mix, first of all, multicast doesn't work on the iPad. So you've eliminated that benefit. Second of all, it's a different video format, so it's HLS is the format that it needs, which is all HTTP content. So if you do have, the good part about that is you can leverage any HTTP caches that are already out there to basically, in essence, split the live stream and or cache the on-demand file. But if you don't have that capability in place, then you have to think about the fact that everybody that's accessing the stream from an iPad is actually pulling an individual unicast stream from a server somewhere.
Or you have to go from, the layer 2 multicast to something like ANT tunneling or something like that.
Right. Or just do, use your caches, or you have to deploy new caches in order to do that.
I agree. It's an absolutely great question, and a lot of enterprises are struggling with that today. Our experience, we observe, again, we're working service provider enterprise at the same time. Enterprises, probably no surprise, are generally a step behind. We introduced HLS over a year ago. I think customers are really just starting to kind of turn it on now. We were there to provide them that. But I think in general, when you see, when you're developing an enterprise CDN, like Jeff indicated, with a lot of old content, you're still going to see a lot of real-time Windows Media, QuickTime, Adobe Flash, and you might be building out a CDN that needs to support all of those.
So, that kind of, oh, go ahead, question.
Deploying a CDN can be quite expensive, and the only use cases is to support streaming. Do you have experience, and how do you justify making that investment for a global company?
Chuck, why don't you
I'll
say
jump
how
into that.
your
So,
customers typically would justify
I think the one, we didn't actually ask about the use cases. We jumped right into streaming. We're at the Streaming Media Conference, but it is a CDN, right? So it's any and all content that you want to stream. Generally speaking, it's things that you can cache via HTTP. So, we look at, obviously, the use cases around live, VOD, again, huge training experience there. Just to kind of emphasize what we talk about on the training side, financial, we have there lots of regulatory reasons, big purpose for training, healthcare, another area for a lot of regulatory and training reasons. But in addition, there's things like digital signage. So a lot of corporations that have embraced digital signage outside of just retail. And then finally, IT software distribution. So it is definitely a multi-use case justification for a lot of our customers when they build out a CDN. It's not just about streaming. Streaming generally is the driver. You know, it's kind of funny. You know, oftentimes when I'm talking to customers, we hear very similar themes around our CEO wants to do a live broadcast. We tried it, it failed. What can you do to help us? We deploy, you know, a CDN with them, and then they start adding more and more use cases and seeing the value. So their value, you know, their ROI decreases, the value increases.
What we were looking for was a way to bring a bunch of different communications tactics and systems together so that we weren't quite so siloed, and so we weren't quite so I don't want to say confused, but there weren't just so many things out there jumbled around that no one could find. You know, we have a fairly big Office 365 deployment, you know, company-wide, and then that introduces Link. And more people are starting to discover the capabilities of Link as both a video and a meeting collaboration tool, but also as a video recording tool. And being able to sit at your desktop and quickly record a quick presentation, share your desktop, and get it out, where I don't have to worry about whether somebody has another tool like Camtasia or something like that installed. I was constantly juggling Camtasia licenses for years, and now all of a sudden I've got this way for people to share a PowerPoint, share their desktop, share an app. We have a lot of apps presentations that people like to go right into the app, and Link gives them that. We have Tandberg video conference units all over the company, including globally. So we looked for something that we could integrate with the Tandberg VCUs and Link and a SharePoint integration. And I was getting a lot of pressure for user-generated content. I mean, one of the things that YouTube and the ever-decreasing price of high-quality cameras has done is everybody thinks they're a videographer now. And that's either good or bad, depending on how you look at it. But people were constantly coming to me and saying, you know, I shot some video of this sales conference we did. Can you post it for me? You know, I shot some video of a quick training that I did. I shot some how-to videos for this new tool that we have. What can I do with them? So our decision to go to an enterprise platform was based and influenced by that, based on that and influenced by that, because we found one that brings all those pieces together and makes it it really makes it unified communications and not just a bunch of people out creating content around the country or the company with nowhere to put it.
Do you want to show some of your visuals on how you made that selection?
Yeah, I mean, I can go quickly through them. I sent Andy some documents that, you know, we set about basically business requirements for our video management solution. We had a lot of stakeholders involved in this process and asked them what they wanted, what they needed, what they could possibly blue sky about. We already had a big list of our own. We brought IT into this, and they had some integration points that they wanted to consider. And so we basically went through and made a big long list. I mean, this is about I just did a quick, you know, PDF version of this, but this is about an 8-page document with all the different functions and features that we were looking at. And then we divided them, you know, in the sort of obvious, these are essential, these are designed, meaning we can kind of work them in as we go, and the future category. And it was amazing how, as you could see from this list, that's not unrepresentative. There were an awful lot of essential things that we needed to have. And then once we got those, we went in search of vendors. And that's the next document. The names have been removed to protect the innocent. And we went through and ranked how these vendors were able to address those needs and measured them against, weighted them against everybody's favorite, doing nothing. And then when we finally settled on a vendor and a choice, we developed a pretty serious project plan. And I think this is really the key to what, if you go to the next document, it's pretty key to what, that's the finished product. But it was pretty key to what the successful deployment, because it was so methodical. And I had a project manager partner from IT who was tremendous in managing this list. And every week we had a regular meeting with the team internally, and then we had another meeting with the vendor. And we went through this list and just checked them off one by one and made sure. And we did so much planning and preparation. So when the guys actually started the installation, there were almost no hiccups. I mean, there were a couple, and it's taken maybe a little bit longer, but who doesn't expect that, right? It didn't go exactly on schedule. But we really hammered away at this process, and I would encourage anyone who is doing this to take this kind of approach. And then the final shot, which you already got a quick glimpse of, is this is the platform that we're delivering here, and it has user-generated content capabilities, it has ratings, it has metadata, it has the ever-elusive but, in my mind, very important search capability. So my vision is that by the end of this year, 10 to 12, 13 years of video and other media content will all be in one place for the users to find, and we can meet some of those needs. So that process was really important for us.
Yeah, and I think if you get back to the cost considerations, is that a lot of people, I think, kind of say, I got to go all in on this. I need to have a caching device at every one of my locations. In a lot of cases, you can kind of do it in stages. So, for example, you want to look at, how many concurrent users are you going to have at different sites? What's sort of my worst case scenario? Look at your past usage patterns. So if you have 100 people out in that remote office, do 100 people actually really watch the video at the same time, or is it really more like 10%? So it'd be like 10 users. So that's kind of your worst case scenario. Or you can do cultural things where you say, at the big offices you can watch it on your PC because we've got the appropriate infrastructure. But at the smaller offices, you need to huddle into that conference room. So then you're only pulling one stream down, and you're in essence doing the content delivery network that way. So I think from a pricing perspective, there are a variety of ways that you can sort of roll it out in stages. What about when you guys were doing it? It sounds like you have kind of done it in stages as time has evolved.
Yeah, well, getting back to use case and justifying putting this thing in, I will tell you this, at Prudential, we do something called an EOS, which is an employee opinion survey. Upper management looks very closely at the EOS, and they want to know what's going on in the company. And this is a way for them to, get a best guess at what is actually happening down in the trenches. One of the questions on that EOS survey was connection to mission, and the workforce did not feel they were connected to the mission. So the CEO, the previous CEO, before we built the network and it was completely adopted, made that a mandate that middle management had to get the employees better connected to mission, and the next EOS score, it will be that point, that question, if it didn't go up, would be reflected on their compensation. That gets their attention really quick. That gives us buy-in from the CEO, from the top. So town halls became not only an aggregate of people in a room, it was also streamed. The message was streamed in real time to all of their locations. So all of the people in that business unit's, the president of that business unit's team heard the same message at the same time. The scores went up. And we built out the CDN, and it was great. We have total backing by upper management. In addition to that, the VPN going live, it didn't go live by accident. It went live because the CEO was getting ready to do a quarterly address, and something weather-related, something out of our control happened, and we told him he had to postpone it because people were not going to be able to make it into the office. And his response was, well, why can't they watch it from home? And we had to tell him that the VPN live streaming did not work on the VPN. Well, that changed. So, you know, those are the kinds of things, benchmarks, that you look back on and enable you to take the next steps and build your infrastructure. And, you know, we are fully supported, and it's something we have to have. We can't go backwards. It's huge.
And just if I can add, you know, from our customer base, you know, the more and more usage of video, obviously much more prolific, and it's an immersive experience for the employee. They're much more engaged. To your point about mission, and you know, I think I forgot what I was going to say. I think just it's not just a one-time usage. It's not an annual event. It's a quarterly event. Now we've got business unit managers, GMs, you know, and VPs that are going forth and doing live broadcast once you've got that infrastructure in place. So yes, it requires investment up front, but it's a buy once and use it many times rather than a recurring charge of going every time to an outside vendor, whether it's cloud-based or a single usage type of thing, to have that consistent cost on your books.
It also gives you a sense of immediacy, because, you know, if there's an event like Sandy, or, you know, some other, you know, maybe there's a merger or something going on.
Exactly.
The CEO now or an executive can get into a studio or just in front of their PC and deliver a video broadcast very quickly, rather than having to bring in, you know, production crews and you know, satellite trucks and all the stuff that used to happen before you would have a network of your own build out.
It's increasingly important for a global company too, because the thing that when you've got, when people are working at HQ and they see the CEO walking through the hallway and they're able to attend the all hands meeting in person, that's one thing. It's a little easier to communicate corporate values and policies and direction to them. But when you've got a software engineer in India or a customer service engineer in Singapore who goes to work in a building, you know, next to another building, where there's not much sense that differentiates their work from the work that's going on in the other buildings, building that culture and communicating it from the top down and even from the middle levels down is really critical to the company's success, to retaining employees. I mean, every company invests so much money in acquiring and training, developing employees, that when you lose them, it's a loss that is very hard to recover from, very expensive loss. Right. And if you can instill the corporate values and make people feel like they really understand what the company's trying to accomplish, and why they're doing what they're doing in terms of new directions or whatever, that's a value in itself that speaks to you know, how the ROI on something like a CDN or an enterprise video platform.
And one of the other things, you mentioned mergers. You know, we're a big corporation and we do M&As, mergers and acquisitions. We recently did one at the beginning of this year. So now we've got, we purchased another company. We've got to get our communication, get them into the fold. And we don't necessarily, once the merger is done, they don't move into our infrastructure. They don't move into our buildings. They stay in their buildings, and we have to somehow connect to them. And it is important from right out of the gate that the president of that group communicates with the incoming group to sort of level set expectations. You know, you're with us now. You're part of our team. These are your key components, and this communication has to happen. And so we do have to do what Andy just said. We have to bring in satellite trucks. We have to sort of bridge that gap in a secure way and work with outside vendors until they're on our domestic network, on our infrastructure, that we can, you know, seal them off and then bring them in. But, you know, that's a process that can take a year or sometimes more. So, and communication is huge. We're actually, this week, we're doing, you know, President Communications and Vice President Communications with those groups, and it's across the country. We bought the company. That company has several locations, so we have to get into their network, securely so no one else can tap into our information, and distribute it and bring those guys up to speed.
All right, so we have about 10 minutes left, and just wanted to talk about some of the different options that are out there in order to deploy these CDNs. So the first option I have here is general purpose server, and this would typically be like a streaming server. So you might, a lot of organizations will, in the past it was Windows Media, they would just place Windows Media servers at all their different locations, Flash servers, or Wowza's here at the show. A lot of people use Wowza to kind of do the content distribution. The second option is really having a dedicated caching appliance like what Cisco delivers, and there's certain advantages to that approach. And now more increasingly, people are creating that software that used to run in the appliance as a virtualized software, so that you can run it either on a blade and a piece of networking equipment, or just on a server that's virtualized at those remote offices, so you don't have to have too much equipment out at those offices. So Chuck, what do you see like in terms of the trends on where most of the people are
if
kind
I
of
can
going
correct
to?
you, correct you on just one thing you said. Yes, we provide for separate appliances. We provide, not in our CDN products are not really providing for the streaming servers. Those would be a different product set. But so we view the service as obviously very complementary.
Oh, yeah.
Very complementary.
Right.
We've a number of our customers. I'm wearing Wowza. I'm fine with that on my lanyard. We have a number of customers that use Wowza with our ECDN products, ECDS products. We've embraced virtualization significantly. So we give the customers a choice, basically, at their customer sites to deploy an appliance if they want to dedicate. A lot of reason why people will pick an appliance is the storage, right? The CDN, you require some level of storage, so you provide them a package, software, hardware there. It's a simple solution. For whatever reason, they want to use God forbid, third-party hardware. We support that. Or one of the big trends we really see is leveraging their existing hardware infrastructure and their network. So we really position and sell our products to be virtualized software that run, basically turning your branch router into a blade server enclosure while it's also doing routing, and multiple VM-based applications running from, we work very complementary with WAN acceleration and optimization products, both within and outside of Cisco. And keep in mind, video is just yet another application. I think I've heard some conversations and panels yesterday about video is really not an IT core competency. That may be true in certain areas, but that's changing significantly. So, that's one of the reasons why they want it on-prem. They want it inside. Besides the technical needs for it, it's like, this is like a VM that's running the point of sale at a retail. It's just another VM, because that retail store, global big box company wants associates to have training videos as well as their, the point of sale applications for software. So, we've embraced it across, a few different instantiations of hardware in Cisco, and that's actually Cisco's approach as well in terms of reuse. Even if you look at, again, not my products, but the telepresence video, as you're familiar with, is one of the solutions that we have that can be leveraged to turn into not only video conferencing, but become part of your HD, your high definition production environment as well.
Jeff, what approach did you guys take?
Well, I think I would have to defer to these guys on that, because what I was looking for was a way to leverage all this legacy that we had in this space, and so I relinquished a lot of the infrastructure decisions and choices to the people at our company I thought were more qualified to handle it.
Yeah, sure.
They were the ones who were struggling day to day with the network traffic, and as long as they took my needs into consideration, I was willing to work with their solutions.
Right.
So that's not really my area of expertise, and I was just looking for a way to keep the ball in the air.
So you focused more on the media management piece of it. So
Absolutely.
that you didn't have to keep publishing everybody else's video and let the network team basically make the decision on
Yeah,
what
and sometimes they make
infrastructure
decisions
they're
that were like, you know, sometimes they'll do something that seems a little less than involved in what we're trying to do. But you know, generally we have a great partnership, and they're big supporters of ours. They're big users of our services and consumers of our product. So I think over the course of several years, we've really developed a pretty tight partnership. And I think this recent deployment is a good example of how the teams have worked pretty closely together, and it's kind of taken a lot of the burden off me.
Okay, good. What would you guys do?
Well, okay, we started with server, basically just a server application. And then we actually started to, we work closely with the network engineering group. We have a group that's sort of in between. It's like an internal consulting group called Relationship Management. And they, we'll tell them what we want to do. They know everything that's happening on the network engineering side. They, oh, well, they're deploying this phone system that's putting these edge devices out there to enable, you know, the phone system to work correctly. It also can handle video. So with that, we use these edge devices to shuttle our video out to the, you know, the most narrow bandwidth, the edge. So we partner closely with those guys, and of course, we're in the BYOD, bring your own device space right now. There are reasons why we're doing that. We're also working on VDI, virtual desktops instances. And so you start, when you get into the virtual desktop infrastructure, it brings up, you know, here you have a screen scrape of something off a server that enables you to do a bunch of stuff in this space. But from a network engineering and from a legal standpoint, we can control software licenses, and we can manage, and we can make sure that that server farm stays up, the back plane stays up. If there is a Sandy at the, you know, central Jersey Shore, New York area, our data centers are still working, and that group of people who are affected could conceivably go to another part of the country and still access and still work and keep business on track. So yeah, we are in all of those spaces.
And I would just add one other comment. I'd add a kind of a trend line pointing down, or timeline, where, you know, customers will, you know, enterprises will go through trying to deploy a server without a CDN, realize they need to put some form of caching in. That's where the appliances come in. And then as you push to the lower bandwidth areas where, you know, costs become more acutely an issue, virtualized software run on existing hardware that's already out at that branch. So. Well,
and that sort of brought up my last point is, so let's say you've got 100 offices and you're putting these appliances out at all these offices. How do you manage that? Is it part of sort of just your network management, or is there separate management that needs to go on? How do you guys manage that? Or do you just rely on the networking guys to take care of it?
Yeah, network engineering, that's their responsibility.
Yeah.
To us, we're agnostic. We, you know, it just has to hit the edge, and if when, you know, the user, the client doesn't click, they don't get a response when they click on a link. It does not, we are not the help desk. We have a help desk in Prudential, and that client, that end user, is instructed to go to the help desk, and it's, you know, it will be troubleshooted from their end. But, you know, those are the highways that, you know, that they manage, and the data runs down those highways across to all of our endpoints.
Question here?
A real quick question. I'm curious if you guys have digital signage networks, and if you're leveraging that digital signage for live webcasts.
All right, so we are just putting in digital signage from a couple different vendors. We're actually building a new site, so we're going to use them as message boards, and the vision is to be able to deploy live content across those, and also recorded content.
We have digital signage, but we do not use them at this point for the live events. And I think that primarily for one thing, the sound is off on all of them to keep they're around the company in break rooms and in hallways and stuff. And I think to keep the noise level down and the distractions down, the sound has been turned off. So they're all static, you know, non-verbal messages. And the other is that there's an awful lot of financial data and IP that goes on in our all-hands live events, and those events are restricted to full-time employees and not to contractors. So contractors obviously have access to all the hallways and the break rooms and everything like that. So I think, at least for now, the intention is to, restrict the live streaming to places where the audience is kind of controlled.
What about leveraging fixed room video conference rooms,
Yes.
for example,
Yeah.
for live
We haven't started that yet, but our intention is to do that, yes.
In the back.
Are you streaming to the VDI sessions? Are you allowing live web streaming into VDI?
Yes. It was a little touch and go at first, but it's now, we're using the next generation of VDI, and it seems to work pretty well.
You haven't seen any performance issues on the server farm or anything like that?
On the server side, no. The network engineering, we did a lot of testing with that, and they're giving us the go-ahead. Where you have a problem is with your ISP. So that person, no matter, if you don't have the bandwidth to get that down the pipe, it's not coming. And so it would, compromise your apps and everything else.
There's also, it's kind of like the split tunneling thing where some of the providers, I know Citrix does this, they'll take the video outside of the VDI session, so it's like a separate video stream.
Are you forcing the user to go out, or are you actually the video in the VDI session?
It's in the VDI session.
But there's ways
At
that
this
you can
point.
do it the other way.
But
and
it's
not have it
seamless,
in the-
yeah, it's seamless to the end user.
Right.
When they,
Yeah, they don't,
You're not forcing them to close their VDI and
No.
put it up on the.
no, yeah, it works seamless.
Any limitation on the actual endpoint itself? Maybe a certain endpoint device now support multimedia, right?
yeah, so you're inside a session, it's a screen scrape. I don't know the answer to that. I know that, we are trying to address the Androids, the iOS. We are able to stream to those devices using H.264, all that stuff. Inside a VDI session, I don't know that. I have not seen it. I've actually, on my iPad, I've streamed to it through the session. So I don't know if that answers your question.
One more question?
The slide before, you had the three options, where the server, the appliance, and the virtualized blade.
Mm-hmm.
What is an example of a virtualized blade? Is that like the Riverbed software on top of a appliance?
Yeah, so Riverbed has basically, if you put a Riverbed appliance out there, they have a,
That would be the second option, but it's the third one, the one that I'm not sure. Is that taking the Riverbed software and putting that on an
it would be on
basic-
some sort of appliance that already is existing there that has a blade. For example, the Cisco Integrated Services router has a separate blade that you can pop into there. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
That you can
So-
run virtualized software.
So in a branch router situation, you can buy a piece of hardware that basically runs as a server, just as if you were buying a rack server. So the virtualized blade is kind of a more of a marketing term around a VM software instance, virtualized software. Basically, the same software that you'd run on an appliance, you run in a virtualized environment.
Okay, well, I think we're out of time. Panelists can stay up here if anybody wants to come up and ask a few more questions. But
Thank you.
thanks, everybody, for participating. I thought it was a great session, and enjoy the rest of the show.